Roman soldiers could march 20 miles, 60 pounds of gear on meals that cost less than your morning coffee. While you're exhausted after a gym session, these ancient warriors sustained superhuman endurance on 4 dirt-cheap foods that modern science is now validating. What did they know about energy that we've completely forgotten? Roman soldiers had to march 20 miles every single day while carrying 60 pounds of gear. That's like walking from Manhattan to the Bronx with a heavy suitcase strapped to your back, daily, for months at a time. How did they do it? Well, forget your protein shakes and energy bars. These guys conquered half the world on what basically amounts to ancient military rations that cost pennies. And here's the kicker. Their diet actually worked better than most modern performance nutrition plans that cost a fortune. The Roman Empire didn't fall because their soldiers ran out of steam. It fell for political reasons hundreds of years after these dietary strategies helped legions dominate Europe, Africa, and Asia. These weren't just random food choices either. Every single meal was calculated for maximum energy, easy transport, and rock-bottom costs. Think about it. Rome had to feed hundreds of thousands of soldiers across massive territories without refrigeration, without supply trucks, and definitely without Whole Foods. They couldn't mess around with fancy ingredients or complicated recipes. But here's what's fascinating. Modern nutritionists are rediscovering that many of these primitive Roman foods pack more sustained energy than today's processed alternatives. The Romans accidentally created the perfect endurance diet while just trying to keep their armies fed cheaply. Take their main staple, for instance. While we're obsessing over quinoa bowls and acai smoothies, Roman soldiers were crushing their fitness goals with something that cost less than your morning coffee. They'd laugh at our $100 monthly supplement bills. And the drinks? Forget Gatorade. Romans had their own hydration solution that actually purified water while providing essential nutrients. It tasted terrible by our standards, but it kept entire armies healthy during campaigns that lasted years. The genius wasn't just in what they ate, it was in how these foods worked together. Every item served multiple purposes. Nothing was wasted. Everything had to earn its place in a soldier's pack. Even more impressive, these weren't just survival rations. This was fuel for peak physical performance. Roman legions didn't just march 20 miles, they built roads, constructed fortifications, and fought battles at the end of those marches. Modern athletes spend thousands on nutrition coaches and specialized diets. Meanwhile, ancient Rome created the ultimate performance eating plan using ingredients so basic you probably have most of them in your kitchen right now. The first food that made all this possible was something Romans called pulse, and it's about to change how you think about simple carbohydrates forever. Now here's where things get interesting. Posca wasn't just water with a splash of vinegar thrown in for kicks. This was the Roman Empire's version of Gatorade, except it actually worked without needing a marketing budget of millions. The recipe? Dead simple. Water, vinegar, and whatever herbs the soldiers could scrounge up. Sometimes they'd add a pinch of salt or honey if they were feeling fancy. But here's the brilliant part. That vinegar wasn't just for taste. It was doing 3 jobs at once, like a Roman Swiss Army knife in liquid form. First job, water purification. Before anyone knew what bacteria were, Roman soldiers figured out that vinegar killed the nasty stuff lurking in questionable water sources. Smart? You bet. Second job, vitamin delivery. The acetic acid in vinegar helped their bodies absorb nutrients better. Third job, energy boost without the crash. Makes sense, right? But here's what most people miss about Posca. It was specifically designed for endurance, not comfort. Modern sports drinks focus on sugar rushes and flashy colors. Romans focused on keeping their guys alive and moving for 20 miles straight. The acidic kick served another purpose too. It made soldiers drink more water, which kept them hydrated during those brutal marches. Ever notice how pickle juice makes you thirsty? Same principle, except Romans stumbled onto this hydration hack 2,000 years before science explained why it worked. Well, there's more to this story. Sharing Posca wasn't just about quenching thirst. It was a bonding ritual. Picture this. You're exhausted, your feet hurt, and you're still 10 miles from camp. Your buddy offers you a sip of his Posca. That shared moment of sourness became a shared moment of brotherhood. The Romans were so confident in Posca that they gave it to Jesus on the cross. Not as mockery, but as the best thirst quencher they had. That's how much they trusted this stuff. And the weird part is, modern research proves they were right all along. Diluted vinegar drinks improve endurance, aid digestion, and help regulate blood sugar. Those ancient Romans were accidentally more advanced than half the energy drinks on store shelves today. But Posca was just their liquid fuel. The real foundation of Roman marching power came from something even simpler, a bowl of what looked like the world's most boring breakfast cereal. While modern protein bars cost $5 each, Roman soldiers got their energy from something that cost practically nothing. Makes sense, right? You can't exactly run an empire when your army's grocery bill bankrupts the treasury, but here's where it gets interesting. These weren't just cheap meals, they were nutritional powerhouses designed by accident. Well, necessity really. When you're marching 20 miles with 60 pounds of gear, your body doesn't care about fancy flavors. It wants fuel that works. The real secret weapon? Pulse, basically ancient oatmeal made from spelt or barley. Sounds boring as watching paint dry, doesn't it? But this stuff was genius. One bowl gave soldiers enough carbs to power through hours of marching. Think of it as the world's first energy drink, except it actually filled you up. And the weird part is how they prepared it. Soldiers would cook huge batches in their century groups. That's about 80 men sharing one massive pot, like the world's least appetizing potluck dinner. But it worked. The fiber kept them full, the carbs kept them moving, and the communal cooking saved time and fuel. Then there's Posca, basically water mixed with vinegar. Your grandmother probably wouldn't serve this at Sunday dinner, but Roman soldiers chugged it like sports drinks. The vinegar killed bacteria in questionable water sources, which beats getting dysentery halfway through Germania. Plus, it actually tasted refreshing after you got used to it. Kind of like how people learn to love black coffee or bitter beer. Let's not forget their portable snacks. Dried figs and dates were the original trail mix. Sweet, chewy, and packed with natural sugars that hit your bloodstream faster than a chariot race. Roman soldiers would stuff pouches with these fruits, creating the ancient equivalent of grabbing energy bars before a workout. But the real MVP was panis militaris, military bread that could double as a weapon if you threw it hard enough. This stuff lasted for months without spoiling. Sure, you needed strong teeth or a cup of Posca to soften it up, but it delivered reliable calories when nothing else was available. The genius wasn't in any single food, though. It was the system. Carbs from pulse, quick energy from dried fruits, hydration from Posca, and lasting sustenance from hardtack. Each piece solved a specific problem that modern armies still face today. Speaking of modern problems, you might wonder how these ancient meals actually translate to today's world. What happens when regular people try eating like Roman legionaries? When Roman soldiers needed to fuel those brutal 20-mile marches, they didn't have energy drinks or protein bars. They had something better. 4 simple meals that kept the world's most feared army moving for centuries. First up was pulse, basically ancient oatmeal with an attitude. Think of your morning porridge, except it could power a guy carrying 60 pounds of gear across hostile territory. Romans made this from spelt or barley, and while it looked about as appetizing as wet cement, it packed serious nutritional punch. The high fiber kept soldiers full for hours, and the carbs provided steady energy release. No sugar crashes when you were facing Germanic tribes. But here's where it gets interesting. Soldiers didn't just eat pulse plain like some kind of medieval punishment. They'd jazz it up with whatever they could find. Wild herbs, a bit of cheese if they were lucky, maybe some foraged onions. One soldier's boring breakfast became another's gourmet experience, depending on creativity and local resources. Then there was Posca, which sounds fancy but was basically vinegar water. Before you wrinkle your nose, this stuff was genius. The vinegar killed bacteria in questionable water sources, preventing the kind of stomach issues that could cripple an entire legion. Plus, it actually tasted refreshing, like a primitive sports drink that your grandfather might have invented. Roman soldiers also carried dried figs and dates, nature's original energy bars. These little powerhouses delivered instant sugar when legs started wobbling on steep mountain passes. Unlike fresh fruit, they wouldn't rot in your pack after 3 days of marching through rain. Smart, right? The real MVP was panis militaris, military bread that could probably stop an arrow. This hardtack-style biscuit lasted forever and provided solid calories. Sure, it was harder than your mother-in-law's meatloaf, but soaked in Posca or stew, it became edible fuel that kept soldiers moving. And when they could get it, salt pork added crucial protein and fat. The salt preservation meant meat that wouldn't spoil, even in Mediterranean heat. high-energy food that traveled well, exactly what you need when conquering half the known world. These weren't fancy meals, but they worked. Roman legions marched farther, fought harder, and conquered more territory than any army in history. Their secret weapon wasn't superior tactics or better armor. It was knowing how to eat smart. Well, food was just part of the equation. The real magic happened in how Romans turned ordinary citizens into unstoppable killing machines through their training methods. But here's where things get really clever. Roman soldiers didn't just eat these foods randomly. They had a system that would make modern sports nutritionists jealous. Take their morning routine, for instance. Before those brutal 20-mile marches, legionaries would start with a bowl of pulse mixed with dried figs or dates. Smart move, right? The complex carbs from barley gave them steady energy, while the natural sugars provided that quick morning kick. Kind of like having oatmeal with fruit, except their version could survive getting trampled by a cavalry horse. Then came the genius part. Every soldier carried what they called their iron rations, basically an ancient survival kit. Panis militaris went in one pouch, salt pork in another, and dried fruits wherever they could squeeze them. These weren't just random snacks. This combination gave them everything needed to keep going when supply lines got cut or when they were stuck besieging some stubborn Gallic fortress for months. Well, the timing mattered too. Roman commanders understood something we're just rediscovering. When you eat affects how you perform. Soldiers got their heaviest meal, usually that hearty army stew, right? After setting up camp. Makes sense when you think about it. They needed those calories for recovery, not weighing them down during the march. And the weird part is how they handled hydration. While other armies were getting sick from bad water, Roman soldiers were sipping their vinegar-water combo like ancient energy drinks. Posca wasn't just about staying hydrated. The acetic acid actually helped their bodies process all those carbohydrates more efficiently. Modern endurance athletes pay good money for supplements that do basically the same thing. Let's not forget the psychological angle either. Sharing that evening stew wasn't just about nutrition. Breaking bread together, or in their case, softening hardtack in communal broth, built the kind of unit cohesion that won battles. Food was their social glue. The Romans even figured out seasonal eating before it became trendy. Spring campaigns meant fresh foraged greens loaded with vitamins after winter's preserved foods. Summer brought opportunities for fresh cheese from local sources. Fall meant stocking up on nuts and late-season fruits before winter marches. But why did this ancient meal plan work so incredibly well? The answer lies in something the Romans stumbled upon accidentally, and it's the same principle that powers today's most successful military nutrition programs. Now here's where things get interesting. Roman soldiers didn't just munch on dried meat and call it a day. They actually made a proper stew that would put your grandmother's Sunday dinner to shame. Well, maybe not shame it, but definitely give it some serious competition. This wasn't your typical throw everything in a pot and hope for the best approach either. These guys had it figured out better than most college students today. They'd take their basic pulse, that trusty barley porridge we talked about, and transform it into something that could fuel 20-mile death marches. The secret? Whatever they could get their hands on. Wild onions growing by the roadside? Into the pot. Some unfortunate rabbit that crossed their path? Perfect protein addition? Foraged greens that didn't look like they'd kill anyone? Excellent source of vitamins. But here's the clever part that most people miss. Roman soldiers weren't just randomly throwing ingredients together like they were playing some ancient version of Chopped. They understood something fundamental about nutrition that we're only now rediscovering. Slow-cooking tough cuts of meat breaks down the fibers, making every bit of protein accessible. Those fibrous vegetables that would be nearly inedible raw, hours of gentle simmering turned them into digestible nutrition bombs, and the timing was everything. Soldiers would start their stew early in the evening when they made camp. By the time they were ready to eat, they had a warm, comforting meal that provided exactly what their battered bodies needed. The psychological benefits were just as important as the nutritional ones. After marching all day in formation, carrying 60 pounds of gear, nothing beats the smell of something hearty cooking over an open fire. It's the difference between surviving and actually having the morale to keep going. Modern nutritionists love to overcomplicate things with their macros and timing windows. Romans kept it simple. Combine your carbs, protein, and whatever vitamins you can find. Cook it slow, eat it hot. The adaptability factor was genius too. No two stews were exactly alike because no two regions provided the same ingredients. Soldiers in Gaul might add different herbs than those marching through Germania, but the basic principle remained the same. This approach to eating kept entire legions fed across thousands of miles of conquered territory. Makes you wonder if we've been overthinking nutrition just a bit, doesn't it? Speaking of overthinking things, you might assume Roman soldiers were constantly hunting for fresh meat to fuel their protein needs. Let's not forget about those wild greens that kept Roman legionaries from keeling over with scurvy. While their buddies back in Rome were munching on fancy imported delicacies, these soldiers had turned into expert foragers, basically the ancient world's version of survival show contestants, except with actual life-or-death stakes. Roman soldiers became surprisingly good at spotting edible plants. They'd grab wild garlic, onions, and whatever leafy greens they could find along their routes. Think your grandfather's Depression-era stories about eating dandelions? Well, these guys were doing it 2,000 years earlier and marching 20 miles afterward. But here's the kicker. They weren't just randomly grabbing plants and hoping for the best. Military training actually included basic foraging skills. Smart move, considering that fresh vegetables were about as rare as a day off in the Roman army. Nettles were a particular favorite, packed with iron and calcium. Sure, they stung like crazy, but after you've been stabbed at by barbarians, a little plant bite doesn't seem so bad. The vitamin boost from these wild finds was crucial. Without it, soldiers would develop all sorts of nasty deficiency diseases that would make them about as useful in battle as a chocolate sword. Makes sense, right? Wild herbs also did double duty as medicine. Feeling queasy from that questionable salt pork, there was probably a plant for that. Got a cut that won't heal? Yep, another plant. These soldiers were walking herbalism textbooks out of pure necessity. And the weird part is how this foraging actually helped with morale. After weeks of eating the same bland pulls and rock-hard biscuits, finding some fresh greens was like discovering a five-star restaurant. Small pleasures matter when you're living rough and facing potential death daily. The variety was impressive too. Depending on where they were marching, through Gaul, Germania, or Britannia, soldiers would adapt to local flora. They became botanical tourists, except instead of taking photos, they were stuffing their faces with whatever wouldn't kill them. Some historians argue this foraging knowledge gave Roman armies a significant advantage. While enemy forces might struggle with supply lines, Roman soldiers could supplement their rations with whatever nature provided. Pretty clever for guys who supposedly just knew how to stab things with pointy sticks. But even with all this plant wisdom, there was one more secret weapon in their dietary arsenal that modern nutritionists would absolutely love. Something that packed serious energy into a tiny, portable package. Well, here's where Roman military genius really shows up. These soldiers weren't just stumbling around hoping to find food. They had turned eating into a precise science that would make modern nutritionists weep with joy. The beauty of Roman military rations wasn't complexity. It was simplicity that worked like clockwork. Take pulse, for instance. This wasn't some fancy ancient superfood marketed by toga-wearing influencers. It was basically oatmeal's tough older brother who'd seen some serious action. Made from spelt or barley, pulse delivered steady energy that lasted longer than your uncle's war stories at family dinners. But here's the kicker. Romans weren't just throwing random ingredients together and hoping for the best. They understood something modern athletes spend thousands discovering. Timing matters. Posca wasn't just sour water, it was strategic hydration. That vinegar didn't just make it taste like liquid pickles, it actually purified sketchy water sources and provided vitamins that kept scurvy at bay. Then there's the psychological angle most people miss entirely. Sharing Posca wasn't just about quenching thirst, it was about building brotherhood among men who'd march into hell together. Makes sense, right? Nothing bonds people quite like collectively drinking something that tastes like it could strip paint. The dried fruit served a dual purpose that would impress any modern sports nutritionist. Quick sugar hit for immediate energy, plus the psychological boost of actually tasting something pleasant. After weeks of hardtack that could double as building material, a sweet fig probably felt like finding treasure. And the weird part is how perfectly balanced their system was without any fancy calculations. Salt pork provided protein and fat for muscle repair. Cheese delivered concentrated calories, Wild greens supplied fresh vitamins. Army stews combined everything into something that actually resembled real food. Romans accidentally created what fitness experts today charge hundreds to design, a complete nutritional system optimized for extreme physical performance. They did it with ingredients you could find at any medieval farmer's market, yet it fueled the most successful military machine in human history. The real genius wasn't any single food item. It was the entire approach: practical, portable, nutritionally complete, and psychologically satisfying enough to keep morale up during months of brutal campaigning. These weren't just meals, they were fuel for an empire. Every bite was calculated to keep soldiers moving, fighting, and conquering. No wonder they managed to build roads, walls, and civilizations that lasted centuries.